Good afternoon, and welcome to our seminar on the cry of the earth, cry of the poor, moral implications of climate change. I am Jeffrey Burns with the Center for Catholic Thought and Culture here at the University of San Diego. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. But before that, I would like to thank the Department of Oceanography and Environmental Sciences for co-sponsoring this, and also the Franciscan School of Theology for co-sponsoring it. The Franciscan School of Theology is just right up the road in Oceanside, and it has a robust affiliation with the University of San Diego right now. So our first presenter, I'll introduce both of them. Our first presenter is Professor V. Ramanathan. He's the Victor Alderson Professor of Applied Ocean Sciences and Professor of Atmospheric Sciences at the University of California, San Diego. He's the Director of the Center for Atmospheric Sciences at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. In 2012, he was named a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and this year he won a major award, the Tang Prize for Sustainable Development. And in their recognition of his work, they said, he receives this award for making seminal contributions to our fundamental understanding of climate change and impacts of air pollution, and taking direct action to advocate and facilitate effective mitigation policies. It's also one of his claims to fame is he was one of the first people to alert us to the greenhouse effect of CFCs. So we welcome Professor Ramanathan. And speaking with Professor Ramanathan will be Father Martin Carbajo Nunez, currently teaching at the Franciscan School of Theology, but he also teaches at the Pontifical University Antonianum in Rome and the Pontifical Lateran University in Rome as well, teaching in ethics and communications. Professor Carbajo studies the relevance of the Franciscan intellectual tradition in formulating a global ethic and facing the challenges of the new digital age. He has many publications, but his two most recent are A Free and Fraternal Economy, The Franciscan Perspective, and more currently, Sister Mother Earth, Franciscan Roots of Laudato Si.
I think all of us are astonished at the data that Professor Ram has given us. It's very disturbing, and it's also appealing to our responsibility. Now you can understand why the Pope asked scientists to collaborate with him. We have a different approach. The Church respects the legitimate autonomy of the sciences. But at the same time, the Church presents herself as a master in humanity. So now I will try to offer a humanist approach. I would say that we have to change our mentality. If we don't change our way of thinking, nothing will change. Because, as many people think, business is business. Okay, we have to do this, but let the others do that. I will do business. I will have more money. That's what it interests me. When Levinas and Martin Buber, for instance, after the Second World War, they were, as you know, they were Jews, Hebrews. So they were completely ashamed of what had happened with the Holocaust. So they tried to think, what has been going wrong in Western philosophy that we have arrived to this situation? That's the same question I am asking today. What has been going wrong in our philosophy along history that we have arrived to this climate crisis? So my approach will be humanist. And I can summarize it in two sentences. This one taken from Laudato Si: there can be no ecology without an adequate anthropology. So we have to change the anthropological conception that is behind our way of seeing reality. The second sentence that can summarize what I am going to tell you is this other taken from Laudato Si 2. The need to overcome the healthy dualisms that left a mark on certain Christian thinkers in the course of history. So let's start. In my presentation, I will assert the need to overcome the ontic and ontological dualisms that have led to the technocratic paradigm, the throwaway culture, and a dynamic of permanent conflict at all levels. The thesis of human exception, so that thesis that says that humans are exceptional, different from any other creature, grounds on those dualisms to accentuate the separation between men and the other beings, giving rise to a despotic and irresponsible anthropocentrism. To overcome the current social environmental crisis, we need to assume a relational paradigm and a spirituality that can motivate us to a more passionate concern for the protection of our world. We are in such crisis that I think we have to change our way of seeing reality and also our way of presenting theology in any aspect of it. The encyclical Laudato Si promotes a comprehensive conception of ecology and anthropology. In nature, it says, everything is connected, and therefore the ecological must not be reduced to the green. It should not be considered as something alien to social dynamics and human interaction. I like that sentence that Paul Benedict said. The external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have come so vast. So I have prepared a very long dissertation, but afterwards I was told that just 15 minutes. So I will tell you only the first part, is this one. There were 3 of them. Essentialist anthropology and throwaway culture. In Western culture, the relationship between humans and the environment has been interpreted usually from the viewpoint of an anthropocentric ideology. With modernity, this perspective receives new impetus to the point of defending the absolute dominion of man over nature and over his own body. In the 19th century, scientism reinforces still further this anthropocentrism, and it replaces ethical rationality with instrumental rationality, thus giving way to the technocratic paradigm and the throwaway culture. Here I am following Charles Taylor. Maybe you know him, this Canadian philosopher. So let's see these 2 dualisms that in some way have conditioned our anthropological vision. Ontic dualism. Western philosophy has appealed to creation or evolution to develop an essentialist anthropological conception that emphasizes the separation between man and all other creatures. The thesis of human exception postulates an optic rupture between man and the rest of creation, which would belong to another order of being. So in one part is humans, are humans, and in a complete different level, all the rest. Consequently, man does not attribute any rights to animals and does not feel obliged by any duties to them. He even considers nature as pure neutral matter without any intrinsic value, totally available at his disposal. So he can do anything. He has to humanize nature, as if nature has no sense without humans. The thesis of human exception is based not only on the ontic and ontological dualisms, but also on the exclusive human capacity to access epistemic and ethical knowledge in ways that are out of reach for all other creatures. According to Schaeffer, the major forms of this theory are three. Philosophical, man is considered an ego, a subject radically autonomous and founder of his own being. Therefore, human identity does not depend on biological or social life. That will be the first way of presenting this theory. Second, social. Human identity is substantiated in the social. Man is considered non-natural and even unnatural. Biological life would be only the substratum of humanity. The third one will be cultural. The real human identity is based on culture, which shows human capacity of creating symbolic systems. That cultural transcendence is opposed to nature and to the social. So three ways of presenting it, but the three of them are saying that humans are completely different, that there is a neat distinction with all other beings. Ontic dualism was already present in ancient Greece, where man was supposed to bring order, cosmos, out of chaos, both in things and inside himself, though through an always painful and difficult relationship with nature forces and with his own body. Human being is seen as an essentially different being from the other animals because he is endowed with the logos, word, reason, while all other living creatures are irrational and their actions do not grow beyond the level of instincts or habits. Centuries later, but following the same line of thinking, René Descartes accentuates that dualistic separation. In line with the Cartesian epistemology, so in this slide, you can see what he says about animals. For him, the body of each animal is a machine made by God, so incomparably better arranged and possesses in itself movements which are much more admirable than any of those which can be invented by man. I am quoting him. So the animals are just machines, nothing else. And our body is also a machine. So he accentuates this dualistic separation. The Enlightenment movement, which began at the end of the 17th century, asserts that reason is the essence of human beings, because we are res cogitans. And so he is clearly different from the rest of the universe, that will be res extensa. Humans are rational and free, whereas all non-human creatures respond to the rigid laws of dynamics. The animals would be like machines, as we have seen. The world is not seen as a communion of subjects, but as a bunch of objects, described in mathematical and geometric terms. More specifically, it is defined as clock, machine, workshop, experiment. To understand this operation, it is enough to consider the principles of matter and movement. The works of Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz, among others, reinforced this mechanical model of the world that is observed and perceived in a functionalist and utilitarian way. I would like to quote this sentence by Francis Bacon. He argues that science aims at the enlarging of the bounds of human empire to the effecting of all things possible, and through technology to subdue the forces of nature. That's our mission. Everything is at our disposal. We can do what we think is appropriate. Bergson affirms that the thesis of human exception that I'm trying to explain is the archetype of modern philosophy, at least from the Copernican evolution onwards. However, in recent decades, the socio-environmental crisis is forcing us to change our way of conceiving nature and relating to it. In 2007, Schaeffer, that author, announced the end of human exception. So the environmental crisis is forcing us to think better, as the Second World War and the Holocaust forced philosophers to think better about philosophy. Levinas, for instance, as you know, said, well, Western philosophy has put the I at the center of reality. We cannot go onwards doing that. We have to put the Tao, the other. Ontic dualism is also behind a disembodied spiritualism that avoids any personal involvement in the solution of social and ecological problems. Instead of trying to change the structures of injustice and domination, it appeals to resignation in front of the inevitable evils of this valley of tears. As you know, many times, a spiritual life has been described as climbing the mountain. So we have to climb the mountain. At the end of the mountain is God waiting for us. So as we climb, we are purified of every material connotations in our life. So our soul is being purified, and when it is completely clean, our soul can meet God. That's a bad interpretation of what the mystics say. So if we understand this in this way, we are doing that ontic separation. Material things are to be despised. The only thing that counts is the spiritual thing. So we have to liberate ourselves of anything material. That's not the mystic way. The mystics, as John of the Cross says, as we ascend into God, is not to abandon the world. Because in God, we perceive the real entity of everything that has been created. And in everything that has been created, we perceive God. So that image is okay, but you have to understand it properly. So it also accentuates a hierarchical and dualistic vision of reality. The material world would be an obstacle that has to be overcome because it blocks our pilgrimage and hinders our ascent toward God. That's the other image, the image of pilgrimage. So to be pilgrims, we have to abandon everything. It's not that. The pilgrim does not despise the material world, but sometimes this image has been understood in this way. Rather than coordinated, it insists in subordinating, in subjugating. The path to holiness would demand to subdue the body with its sensuality and to deprecate all material things. So many times we have understood also mortification in this way. The body is bad, our body is bad, so you have to punish it. We have to liberate from the body. We have to subjugate it. That's not the real way of understanding humanity. Okay, so that will be ontic dualism. Let's see ontological dualism. Ontological dualism distinguishes clearly between the body and the spiritual, rational dimension of man. The latter would be the most authentically human, and therefore the body should be subordinated to it. Man is described using multiple oppositional pairs: body-soul, rationality, affectivity, need, freedom, nature, culture, instinct, morality, etc. Francis of Assisi had to face the ontological dualism that was very present in his times. For example, among the Cathars. This heretical, you consider a map of the extension of this movement in Europe. This heretical Manichaean and Gnostic movement despised everything visible and material, including the human body, which would have been created by Satan, the evil god of the Old Testament. The human soul would belong to a completely different realm, as it would have been created by the good God of the New Testament. Consequently, the Cathars deprecated the body as an undesirable prison for the soul and as something material, completely alien to it. Even Christ would have not had a real body. That was only apparent. Later on, Descartes makes a net separation between the rational soul and the body. The first will be the essence of man, who is characterized by his ability to think, res cogitans, as we have already said, while his body would be a material addition that does not differ substantially from those of animals. So, as he said that the animals were machines, our body is also a machine, practically. Both dimensions of the human being will come into contact through the pineal gland. The emphasis on one of these two elements, body of soul, will give rise to two opposing trends in the understanding of man: idealism and materialism, both characterized by a strong dualism. Idealism focuses on rationality and neglects the corporeal dimension. On the other hand, materialism reduces man to the materiality of his body, considering the body as a mere cosmic element. In fact, the modern anthropocentric affirmation and the Enlightenment optimism coexists with reductionist anthropologies that deny the spiritual dimension of man and declare him a necessary prisoner of both his impulses and social conditioning. The human being will be fully understood by observing his explicit behavior, using the stimulus-response method, as he always reacts in a reflexive mode to environmental stimuli, behaviorism. Even Aristotle, far back, had affirmed that some people are enslaved by nature and condition of soul. Slavery and colonizing imperialism were also justified by denying that the barbarians and the discovered Indians had a soul. So you see how important has been along history this neat distinction that has supported even this way of thinking. The ontological dualism keeps being present today. Frequently, the body is seen as an object to be possessed and manipulated at will, something that we must shape and control because it has hindered the development of our own identity. The different kinds of arbitrary dominion over one's body turn often subtly into thinking that we enjoy absolute power over creation. Well, that is my presentation. I think I have already gone more than 15 minutes. Basically, I will try to complement what Professor Ram has told us before. In order to change and to face the environmental crisis, I am convinced that we have to start changing our mentality. The mental ecology must go together with the measures, what we can do. Because if we are not convinced that caring for the earth is important for us, that to get to God, we have to discover Him in nature. If we don't think that, we think that that is something we must do because it is convenient, we never do enough. Thank you.
So Professor Ram, would you like to make any response to Father Martin?
Just one observation. I was sitting there and I was thrilled at the way Father Martin concluded his talk. We have to change here to solve the environmental problem. Remember what the 50 academics came to the conclusion, societal transformation. I was thinking of societal transformation as educating, empowering people with knowledge. But I think I accept more Father Martin's way of societal transformation, changing the way how we think about nature.
Thank you. So I think we're going to throw it open to questions from the audience there. Yes.
Well, I think that the economy here, well, in my book, A Free and Fraternal Economy, I put together free and fraternal. So freedom is important for an economy to work. But at the same time, it must be fraternal. Economy, I think that today has been based on the homo economicus, so a conception, anthropological conception that considers that any one of us behaves in a certain way that is more or less the same for everybody, because we are interested. So economy has been based on what some author says non-tuism, so not to see the face of the other, the contrary to Levinas that wanted the other to see the bare face of the other. It's based on economic goods. Efficiency is the main purpose of economy. But the economy will work better if, together with economic goods, we put relational goods. When we go to the doctor, if the doctor is a very efficient professional, but he does not treat you well, doesn't let you feel well, welcome, I'm sure you will not be happy.
My question to both of you is, how can we accelerate a spiritual or cultural transformation so that we can address our climate crisis?
Well, the title of this meeting is Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. So the earth is crying. that means that we can listen to the earth. If it is crying, it's because the earth has a dignity. So we have to enter into kinship. We have to enter to perceive that we are part of the earth. That will help us to learn also from the earth. We have to be interactive. Since the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council, the Church, says Cardinal Ravasi, has to become interactive in any way. Also in evangelization. First, evangelization was understood as going to those who have not heard of Jesus and tell them what they should know. Today is not that way of understanding. When you go there, you are also evangelized because God has loved them and because nature and every human being is a book God has written. If we understand this, we have to change our mentality. When we approach the earth, it's not something informed that we have to humanize. No, the church is talking to us, is making us know how we can behave properly. So as the professor was telling before, the church, the earth is telling us how to preserve it also, if we are attentive. So instead of putting, as Levinas says, the eye at the center, we see, we know, we have to open our ears and listen to the cry of the earth. To understand how to listen to the earth, there are several positions, different positions. That sentence, as you know, comes from Leonard Boff, a theologian of the liberating theology that was not much appreciated at the Vatican for some years. But he says, Leonard Boff says, how to listen to the cry of the earth. He says, he uses a liberationist epistemology, obviously, so that those persons who suffer from the violence that assaults nature, as many indigenous peoples do, have a privileged perspective in understanding the sort of protection earth requires. So how to listen to the earth? Many times listening to the poor that are suffering because the earth is mistreated. If we have this approach, everything will change.
No, I absolutely agree with that, Father Martin. The thing I would mention is that there are two things I'd like to suggest beyond what we have heard. A large majority of American Catholics do not take Laudato Si seriously. Apparently, some says, if I want to hear about science, I would go to scientists. What I want to mention is that every sentence on climate change in Laudato Si is impeccable. As a scientist, I would like to engage with Catholics who have a problem with that and let them know where each statement can be justified. So I think it'll be fantastic if Catholics can unite behind Laudato Si.
I would say also that it will be good to promote the contact with nature at any level. We can do much more about that. If we don't stimulate our moral imagination, ideas are not enough. So doing the Santiago way, I come from Spain, so and any kind of initiative that makes you in contact with nature, volunteering in some way or other, and also doctoral dissertations. One of my students in Rome is starting now to work on Buddhism and Laudato Si on compassion. So he's from India, by the way. So I think we can, all of us can do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the final question for real.
The climate change issue, to me, it's an issue of wrong technology, that's fossil fuels. I'm focused on what I dump into the air. So that's my bias. But I agree with you. If I think of the broader problem in the way Pope Francis talks about in Laudato Si, trashing everything, Yeah, we are taking from minerals from the earth and trashing it.
Yes. One of the principles of Laudato Si is less is more. So I think that's important. In our society, we tend to think that the more we have, the biggest we are, the more important we are, and this is not. So I will come again to relational goods, to stress the importance of those. So there is a sentence in Laudato Si that I like a lot. It says, the human person grows more, matures more, and is sanctified more to the extent that he or she enters into relationships, going out from themselves to live in communion with God, with others, and with all creatures. I think that's a good key to understand the problem.
And I think that's a very good place to end. I want to thank Professor Ramanathan and Father Martin for a wonderful presentation. We can continue this outside with a little reception right outside the door here. So thank you all.